There is a kind of love that refuses the theater of confession. It does not demand a stage, nor does it crave the applause of witnesses. It lives in small, incendiary acts, a hand that steadies a trembling cup, a message saved and reread at 2 in the morning, a silence that holds until the world softens enough to be trusted. Such men learn early that tenderness is a private law, not a public spectacle. They register devotion in the economy of gestures, the way a jacket appears without being asked, the way a familiar song becomes a map of maps, the way their steadiness is felt rather than announced. To watch them love is to see absence and presence braided. They are present like a lighthouse offshore, luminous but unmoving, their light assigned to keep another ship from crashing without ever inviting the world to come aboard. This silence is not weakness, it is a decision forged from a long apprenticeship with cost. They have watched declarations dissolve into expectations, promises crumble beneath the weight of habit. They know the language of escalation, how the tender word becomes a currency of demand, how vulnerability once shown is used as a ledger to be balanced against failure. So they choose containment. They place their affection under lock, not because they mistrust the beloved, but because they have learned that love, when exposed too early, invites a marketplace of transactions they will not accept. To love quietly is to insist that the beloved be loved for themselves, not for how well they can respond to public proof. These men are not without passions that roar and forget the world. They burn as intensely as any poet. They feel with volcanic depths. But their fire is channeled into durable things, a promise kept in the dark, a repair made at dawn, the courage to stand guard while the other sleeps. Their tenderness is sovereign, not theatrical. It demands respect because it is not bargaining for acknowledgement. They understand that truth is not the same as spectacle. The loud declaration can be faked. The quiet constancy cannot. The heart that endures in silence has already passed a test of its own making. It has proved itself to itself before it ever needed to prove itself to anyone else. And yet there is thunder in these men, an inevitability that alarms the complacent. It is not a temper tantrum or a dramatized exit. It is an elemental response when the integrity of their quiet is breached. Imagine an ancient forest that has sheltered a village for generations. The villagers sleep within the safety of its shade, unaware of the slow rot at the roots. When the rot reaches the trunk, the forest does not whisper, it collapses in a sound that rearranges the horizon. So it is with these men. Their departures are geological because their commitments were subterranean. When trust is broken, or when betrayal turns a sacred economy into a ledger, the silence that held everything together transforms into thunder. The leaving is not an act of spectacle, but a final, decisive law of self-preservation, a reassertion that boundaries once violated cannot be stitched back with apologies. This thunder is not vindictiveness, it is a repudiation of erosion. Small compromises accumulate like insects under paint until the portrait peels away. When what remains is a simulation of love, obligations without warmth, rituals without meaning, the man who loved in quiet recognizes the absence of the thing he once guarded. He departs not because he seeks drama, but because he refuses to cohabit with a ghost. To leave in thunder is to make clear what silence could not protect, that certain kinds of surrender are irredeemable, and that dignity, once traded, cannot be reclaimed. Their psychology is tempered by two paradoxes. The first, strength and tenderness are not opposite ends of a scale, but the same weight measured differently. Tenderness without backbone becomes softness that erodes. Backbone without tenderness becomes tyranny. These men have learned to balance both. Their tenderness is strong because it chooses when to reveal itself. Their strength is tender because it protects rather than dominates. The second paradox, attachment and freedom coexist, not contrary, but complementary. They attach themselves fully to a person, to principles, to the slow construction of a shared life, while retaining the autonomous flame that makes them irreplaceable. Freedom here is not escape, it is the capacity to honor one's inner code, even when the world bargains to trade it away. There is precision in their choices. They do not commit to rescue, they commit to recognition. Rescue is an emotion that hopes to fix. Recognition is a steadier art that sees the other as who they are and aligns one's life accordingly. Thus, their love is disciplined. It is not a series of impulsive rescues that leave both parties exhausted. It is an architecture of small acts that over time create a shelter. They are craftsmen of constancy. They understand rhythm, when to speak, when to build, when to widen the silence until it contains everything necessary. This is why their leaving is so devastating. The architecture that collapsed was not a flimsy promise, but a whole life quietly assembled. Their minds are also confidential archives. They memorize details as if recording a liturgy, the turn of a phrase that reveals character, the ways someone moves when comforted, the small betrayals that accumulate like sediment. These records are private. They are not traded or announced. Yet when the ledger is full of evidence that the relationship no longer honors its first principles, the archive is opened. The thunder that follows is the sum of all those stored betrayals, finally given voice. It is not angry speech for the sake of catharsis. It is the report of a historian reading the dates aloud. The leaving is a testimony. Love in silence cultivates patience, and patience cultivates precision in pain. They know how to wait for truth to reveal itself. They endure winters of uncertainty because they trust the seasons. But endurance has limits that are not weakness. It is wisdom. To endure indefinitely in the face of degradation is not noble, it is masochistic. The psychology of these men recognizes the threshold where patience becomes surrender. When that threshold is crossed, leaving is not surrender, it is a reclamation. There is also a moral anatomy in how they choose partners. They seek companions who can hold paradox, people who value independence yet are willing to be seen, people who appreciate discipline yet can respond to tenderness. They have learned to read for congruence rather than chemistry alone. Chemistry can intoxicate and blind. Congruence endures. They watch for a match in the deeper registers, values, resilience, the ability to be alone and stay present, the willingness to accept love without converting it into leverage. This is why their relationships, when they work, appear to be built of quiet rituals and private talismans rather than dramatic performances. A shared joke that never leaves the room becomes a covenant. A sequence of small, faithful acts gains more weight than any dramatic display. Sometimes their silence is misread as emotional unavailability. This is the tragic misinterpretation of our time, which confuses volume for authenticity. The world tends to believe only what shouts, but to shout is often to compensate. The man who loves in silence does not perform need, he embodies presence. He is available in the ways that actually matter, in the late-night repairs, the signatures on quiet forms, the willingness to walk into a difficult conversation with a steady hand. His love is measured not by how many times he says, "I love you," but by how thoroughly his life is arranged around the person he cherishes. When thunder comes, it clears the air. The collapse clarifies what remained ambiguous. It reveals who will rise and who will not. It forces reckoning. The loved one left will confront the truth of what was lost, not only the man, but the possibilities that silence had been nurturing, the household of rituals, the late-night conversations waiting to happen, the small acts of care that would have sustained a long life. For the man, the thunder is a return to self. It is the restoration of a boundary that had been transgressed. He walks away to preserve the integrity of the love he once gave. He leaves because remaining would have turned that love into a lie. There is a final lesson in their psychology about mastery of endings. Most people handle beginnings with more grace than endings. Beginnings glitter. Endings require discipline. The men who love quietly have practiced disciplined endings. They do not dilly-dally in liminal spaces. They choose the decisive moment with the same care they used